Hello, my name is Paul Thomas Edward Cusick. I'm an engineer by education, but I do research in every field that universities teach in. This particular paper is on physics, on light, and how it's been regarded for the last couple of centuries and how I think it actually works. The theories of light as being either a wave or a particle go back to the ancient Greeks. Newton, of course, favored a particle theory of light, though he was not completely convinced that this was correct. The only major proponent of a wave theory in Newton's time was the Dutch physicist and astronomer Christian Huygens, who published his ideas in 1678. In Newton's corpuscular theory, light was imagined to be a stream of minute particles or corpuscles, bodies, emitted by a light source shooting through empty space like bullets in the form of light rays and detected by their impact on the retina of the eye. In Huygens' undulation theory, light was thought to be a wave spreading out in all directions from a light source, transmitted via a medium known as the ether, and detected by the wave's creation of sympathetic vibrations in the retina. Light waves were regarded as analogous to the sound waves. In the case of sound, the medium that undulated was known to be the air, whereas with light it was supposed to be the ether. Einstein, whose relativity theory finally killed off the ether as a scientific concept in the year after 1905, was not surprised that Newton distrusted it and adhered to a theory of light in which the role of ether was not essential. Four hypotheses follow by Thomas Young, the first three of them buttressed with chunks of quotations from Newton's writings, mainly from his optics. Here they are. Number 1. A luminous ether pervades the universe, rare and elastic in a high degree. 2. Undulations are excited in this ether whenever a body becomes luminous. 3. The sensation of different colors depends on the different frequencies of the light of the retina. And 4. All material bodies have an attraction for the ethereal medium by means of which it is accumulated with their substance, a small distance around them and in greater density and greater elasticity. Newton's authority could not be adduced in support of the four hypotheses because the hypothesis stood in direct opposition to Newton's own view. Young admits that he is unsure of this, and the fourth hypothesis is not fundamental like the other three. And within 2 years he abandoned his ether distribution hypothesis as unnecessary to explain the phenomena of light without ever abandoning the ether itself. So we got 6 parts. Part 1 is light in the ether. Part 2 is light in the ether 2. Part 3 is light in the ether 3. Part 4 is nuclear resonance. Part 5 is light and sight, the human eye. And Part 6 is Thomas Young on light. So we see in Part 1 here, light in the ether. In this part of the paper we consider light traveling through the ether, which we previously determined to be Teflon, PTFE. All tetrafluoride, ethylene. So light is dependent on space. Space is equal to the cross product of energy and time, which is equal to the absolute value of energy times the absolute value of time times sine theta. And when time and space are equal, then we have energy is equal to 1 over sine theta, which is cosecant theta, which is equal to c. So if we have c times velocity equals e, c is the speed of light, which is 3, and velocity is 1 over root 2, which is equal to 3 over root 2, which is equal to 2.12132. Energy is equal to space over time times the speed of light, which is equal to 4/3 divided by root 3, the eigenvector, times 3, which is equal to 23.094, which is equal to the ln of pi. And the logarithmic function is essential here. So we have mass is equal to ln of t, and in our example above, t was equal to pi. So we have mass and energy equal, so energy is equal to mc squared, potential energy is equal to mc squared from Einstein. So c squared is equal to 1, so c is equal to plus or minus 1. But c is equal to E equals 1 over sine theta equals cos theta. So plus or minus 1, c is equal to 1 over sine theta. Theta is equal to pi by 2, which is equal to the time. Mass is equal to the ln of t, which is equal to the ln of pi by 2, which is equal to 4. So the mass of the universe is 4. So here we have a universal block on a plane. And we have the normal force there, N, and the gravity mg pulling it down, straight down, and we have the force of friction hauling it back. So we have the equations there for the simple block on a plane. And Poisson's ratio is equal to 0.26, which is for ether at temperature minus 195 Celsius. It's equal to pi by 4. So here we have an important concept called the economic multiplier. It's used. It's in everything from biology to math to art. It's very important. The economic multiplier. It just says that when you have $1, the first person who gets the dollar spends all of it, but 1/7 or 15%. And so then you have 85 cents, and that goes to the next person who spends all of it except for 15% of 85, etc., until all the money's gone. And it takes 7 steps for the money to be gone. So that's the economic multiplier. It's an important concept. So we have here the time is equal to the kinetic energy, which is equal to 1/2 mv squared, which is equal to 1/2 m. We just showed m is 4, and the velocity is equal to the acceleration, which are equal to the sine and cosine of 45 degrees, which is equal to 1 over root 2. So it's 1/2 times 4 times 1 over root 2 squared, which is 1. So time is equal to 1. And mass is equal to the ln of t, so the ln of 1 is equal to 0, so E equals 0. So on the plot of the ln function crosses the x-axis at t equals 1 and E equals 0 as a result. Potential energy equals mc squared, so we have mass is 4 times 3 squared is 9, 36. Kinetic energy is 1/2 of that, which is 18. So total energy is 36 plus 18 is 54. And the potential energy divided by the total energy is equal to 36 over 54, which is 6.66, which is G. That's why G is 6.66. Actually 6.673, but anyway. And we have the formula, of course, the total energy is equal to the potential energy plus the kinetic energy. So 1 is equal to 0.666 plus kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is 0.333, which is 1 over C, which is equal to T. And C is equal to V is equal to 1 over T, which is equal to E, which is equal to sine or space over time. Space and time are equal, so it's 1 over 1 is 1. And then space times the temperature times the mass times the force times the period is 28. And we'll see that number again as the sum of the digits from 0 through 7. That's our economic multiplier again. 1 over 81 is equal to 0.1234567 So it crests over when it hits 7 and becomes adding 2 instead of just 1. That's why the economic multiplier works. We know Poisson's ratio is 0.26. So here we have a model that shows how light actually works. We have 6 pendulums here, and Yeah, this was on my boss's desk actually. He had a pendulum like this with silver balls, and you take the first pendulum and raise it up and let it go, and it swings down, and it hits the second pendulum, which doesn't move. It just it passes through the second, third, fourth, and fifth ball until it reaches the ball in the end, and the ball in the end pops up. So it's interesting to see how that works, but that's a model for how light actually travels. It's a longitudinal wave, which is the same as sound. Sound is a longitudinal wave, which is compressed in the air, and light is compressed in the ether. And where Einstein was going wrong in 1905 was that he got rid of the idea of the ether, and that was a mistake. It was a huge mistake. So they're called coupled oscillators. So we have the ether, we have the force, which is a vector. That little line over the force means a vector in my notation, is equal to Q, which is the elementary charge, 1602, times the cross product of V and B, B is equal to G. So it's the magnitude of V times the magnitude of G times the sine of 60 degrees, plus the force energy is equal to 1 over the force, and energy is equal to 1 over sine theta, so F equals sine theta. So force there is sine theta, or sine of 60 degrees. And it all turns out to be 2.995, which is pretty close to C. 2.9979 is C. So for conic sections, we have a plane that's cutting through the conic section, and the critical angle is 1 over C. It's called phi, and that is when a circle cutting through horizontally to cutting vertically, on the plane is traced instead of a circle is traced, you have a parabola traced. So this is how we broke out of the circle, because we have a circle, we just keep repeating, going around and around in circles, and we had to have the parabola to break free from that circular. That's the moment of creation. So then we have, as I mentioned, the ether is Teflon, or polytetrafluoroethylene, BTFE, has a density of 2,200 kilograms per cubic meter, which is the same as concrete, interestingly enough. And the ether is made up of carbon, 2 carbons for every 4 fluorines, C2F4, and it's a monomer. That's the monomer. It's a polymer. There's many mers make up a polymer. And here we have the Reynolds formula, which is the inertia forces of the viscous forces, which is equal to ma over 1/2 rho v squared. And that's where our number 1 over 81 comes in, with the economic multiplier I was just talking about, 0.01234567, and it crossed over to 9. And that's equal to the mass. So that we use the Reynolds number, and we calculate using mass as 4, and the density of the universe of the ether is 4 over pi. Speed of light is, the velocity is the speed of light, which is 3, and we end up with 2.99 for C. This is the speed of light, of course. And then we have our distance formula that comes out of first year university physics. Distance equals VIT plus 1/2 AT squared. Another symbol for distance is S or D. S is equal to the velocity, which is C, speed of light times T plus 1/2 AT squared. S is equal to T. So we have, it results that A is equal to 0 and time is equal to 0. And acceleration equals 0 just means that light neither speeds up or slows down. It has a constant velocity. And the velocity is 3, which is the cosecant of 6 theta, which is equal to 3. So then we have In this slide, just the distance is equal to VIT. Distance equal to velocity times time. Velocity is equal to distance over time. So dot distance and velocity are equal to 1. The velocity is equal to 1. So if we plug our values of velocity at 1, time is 1, and 1/2, a is 0 times 1, that second term becomes 0. So 1 equals 1. And then we have that the momentum is equal to mv, and force is equal to ma. mv is equal to cos theta, and ma is equal to sine theta, which we've already explained for sine theta. And p with the line over top is the vector, it's momentum, mv. So then we have Pythagoras' trigonometric identity, which is the cosine squared plus the sine squared is equal to 1 squared. So when sine theta is 45 degrees, cosine 45 is 1 over root 2. So we have 1 over root 2 squared plus 1 over root 2 squared, which is a half plus a half, which is 1 squared, or 1. And then we have force is equal to ma. A is 0, so sine theta is 0. Theta is equal to t, time, which is equal to 0 or pi. So time ranges from 0 to pi. And don't forget about the ln function. At time 0, the ln function is minus infinity, and time equal to pi is where the cycle terminates and reverts back to run through again from t equal to 1 through t equal to pi. So let's see, here we just have our mass is equal to the ln of t, or energy is equal to the ln of t, because mass and energy are equal, potential energy. So we have we have up here at the top, your potential energy is equal to t squared minus t minus 1. That's the golden mean parabola. We know that mv minus 1/3 times 3 is equal to minus 1, and that's true. So if we have energy, potential energy, it should be PE at the top line there instead of P. It's potential energy is equal to minus 1. Then we solve that quadratic, and T is equal to 0 or 1. So that's when the universe begins at T equals 1. And momentum is equal to mv, so the momentum is 1 equals m times 3. M is equal to 1 over 3. We know that m is equal to ln t, so minus 1/3 equals ln t. T it should be 1/3, not 1.3. 1/3. T is equal to minus 1/3, which equals 71.65 degrees, which is 1.25 rads. And that is the minimum value of the golden mean parabola. It's where the slope of the tangent is equal to 0. It's minimum for the golden mean parabola. The golden mean parabola is essential. It was known by the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Hebrews. It's encoded in the Bible. It's very important. The roots of the golden mean parabola are, of course, the golden mean 1.618 or minus 0.618. We'll see more of that later. So continuing, we just have energy is equal to mass is equal to minus 1 over 3. So if we set the energy equal to minus 1 over 3 in the golden mean parabola, we have T is equal to 0.9569 multiplied by pi is equal to 3, which is your speed of light. So we have elementary particles now. Photons are elementary particles of light. E is equal to Planck's constant. So H with a line crossed through the tail there, times nu. Energy equals Planck's constant times the frequency, in other words. So E is equal to M is equal to minus 1 over 3 times Planck's constant is 6.626. I don't bother with powers of 10. I'm doing everything in proportions. I can't carry all the powers of 10. I can't keep them straight. Another thing that has to be done is units have to be put on this, which I've attempted to put some units on in a paper recently. So if someone feels the energy, they can go through all this and put powers of 10 and the units on it and make sure it all works. But I work in proportions. Anyway, the frequency is equal to a half, which is equal to T, and that's T min, or it's the minimum time when the energy, as we said, is minus 1.25. So we have E is equal to 2 is equal to minus d2E by dt2, the second derivative. So Y is equal to minus Y prime, so E is equal to 2. T squared minus T minus 1 equals the energy equals 2. Then we have T is equal to 2 or minus, should be minus 1 there. And then we have, when we put a half, of course, into the golden mean parabola at the bottom, we have a half squared minus a half minus 1 is equal to minus 1.25, which is the minimum energy of the golden mean parabola. So for a photon, we have a d2E by dt2, the second derivative of the energy, and the energy is equal to the golden mean parabola. So the second derivative would be, if it's T squared minus T minus 1 equals E, then dE by dt is 2T minus 1, and the second derivative, d2E by dt2, is equal to 2. So so we see that in the Clairaut differential equation there, that d2E by dt2 minus G equals 2. The energy of a photon is equal to 6.626 Planck's constant times the frequency, which we've shown is minus 1/3, is equal to minus 2. So that's where we end up with Y equal to Y negative Y prime prime. So part 2 now, light in the ether. In this part we consider the propagation of light through the ether. The ether was abandoned by modern physicists until recently. Light travels through ether, and this changes everything about the propagation of light. You won't understand how light travels if you don't believe in the ether. If you don't believe in the ether, you're outdated. So energy, minimum energy should be minus 1.25 is equal to minus 1 minus 0.250. 0.250 is the period. So minus 1 minus 4 equals minus 5, which implies that T excuse me, is equal to 3. When you have the function equal to the derivative, you have 2t minus 1 as the derivative is equal to t squared minus t minus 1. When t is 3 equals 5, it's when the function equals the derivative. And that's an important concept as well, the function equal to the derivative. So space is equal to energy times time, the cross product of energy and time. And when space and time are equal, we have 3 for space. Space and time are equal. Equals minus 5 times 3 times the sine of theta. Sine theta is equal to 0.2. T is equal to 115.369. And the energy is equal to 1 over time, which is equal to 1 over 115.369, which is 0.866, which is equal to the sine of 60 degrees. So 1 over 0.866 is cosecant, which is equal to C. I'm just doing some work also on number theory, and it's some interesting results regarding that last equation. So we have Planck's equation, as we've seen, is the energy is equal to the Planck's constant times the frequency. And the elementary charge is 1.602. I think it's times 10 to the minus 19, but like I said, I don't carry the powers. So dq by dt is the change in current with respect to the change in charge with respect to time is the current which I use the symbol I. Some people use J, and I use I. And I also use I for the imaginary number. A little bit confusing, but and E's used enough times too, for Young's modulus, the energy, and a lot of different things. So T is equal to 12.06, V is equal to 0.833 equals sine theta. Theta is equal to 56235. Put that into the golden mean problem. We have approximately 1.246, which is almost equal to the minimum energy. So we have the difference there is 4, which is equal to the mass. Invisible light is seen at when energy is equal to the minimum. So we have 1.246 plus mass is equal to the absolute value of minus 1.25. For visible light, E min is equal to minus 1.25. And the frequency is 1 over the wavelength, which is 1 over 1 equals 1. Frequency, the wavelength is 1. Frequency is equal to 2 pi over 2 pi equals 1. 2 pi equals the frequency times 2 pi. The frequency is 1 over 2 pi, which is 1 out of 360 degrees. It's 1 radian. So we have omega squared is equal to 1 over CL is equal to 1 over pi times 2. So 1 over 2 pi. That's 1 per cycle. 1 per cycle is omega naught. It's equal to 1 anyway, so when it's squared, it's still equal to 1. And space equals time. So we have the familiar space is equal to the cross product of energy and time, and we end up with figuring that the volume, that the mass over the volume of the density is equal to 4 by pi, which is equal to the density of the ether. It's very important. It's the inverse of the time. And the time is the resistance, and the density is 1 over the time is the energy that it takes to overcome the resistance of the universe. So of course 4 is equal to mass, and pi is equal to time, and the value of 4 over pi is 1.2732, 1.273, so you'll see that drop off as you'll know it's density. So 4 times the volume, 4 over the volume is 127.3. The volume is equal to 1 over pi. It's equal to 1 over the capacitance. 4 divided by 4/3. 4/3 is the space. Equals 3, which equals C equals E. And E over T equals 3 over 3 equals 1. Energy is 1. Mass is equal over time is equal to 4 over 1 equals 4. Mass over time equals 4 over pi equals 1.273. Omega naught squared is equal to 1 per cycle. It's equal to 1 over 2 pi times 2. We see that light propagates through the ether, which is Teflon. The red shift, which is what threw people off, is explained by the fact that light must travel through more ether when the object is further away. Incidentally, when the supposed proof for Einstein's theory of relativity was that saying that light's bent by gravity was the fact that a star appeared not to be in the position it was supposed to be in, and the explanation was given that the light was affected by the gravity of the sun. And the fact is that it's actually the light going through the holes in the ether is the reason the light was bent, not because of the gravity. And they took that and ran with it, and they were wrong for 100 years. So paper 3, light in the ether, paper number 3. In this paper we consider how light travels through the ether. It is a longitudinal wave that compresses the other particles. We've seen that in that little model I said was on my process test. There it is. We have the pendulums, and I've already explained that, so I won't go into it again. The one on the end there pops up when you take the first one and strikes the others. Interesting. And so we have simple harmonic motion, SMH. So we have MA is equal to minus KS. MA is Newton, minus KS is Hooke's law, spring law. And so we said solve for mass is equal to minus KS over A. M is equal to K minus K times 1. M is equal to K, which is 0.4233. And then minus K over M is 0.4233 divided by the mass of the periodic table is 118 is equal to pi by 4 is equal to the time, the critical time. Pi by 4 is 45 degrees. We've seen that sine and cosine are equal when t or theta is equal to pi by 4. So we have that 2m is equal to minus kv over v squared. So we have 0.4233 divided by 1 over root 2. It's a velocity squared. It's a half. It's equal to 8466, which is approximately equal to the sine of 1 radian. So Einstein's equation, he didn't actually formulate it to look like that, but that's why I make it look. People call energy equals mc squared. I call potential energy equal mc squared. It's more illustrative, I think, to call it potential energy, because mass is potential energy. The other formula, of course, is Ke, which is kinetic energy, and it's equal to time, and it's equal to 1/2 mv squared. And the velocity is c, it's equal to 1/2 mc squared. So you putting Einstein's equation as p equals mc squared is a good habit to get into, I think. So then we invoke Bernoulli. Bernoulli was a fluid mechanic. So we studied Bernoulli in civil engineering, and he found that it was a constant value when you have the head plus the pressure divided by the density plus the the kinetic energy of the fluid 1/2 rho v squared. So when we put the figures in there, 0 plus 2.14 divided by 4 by pi plus 1/2 times 4 over pi times 1 over root 2 squared, it comes out to 2, which is equal to dE by dt. I was making an error there in the calculations. I had the wrong value for an integral. I was having energy is equal to 2 cubed over 3, which is 8 over 3, which is 2.666, which is the superforce. And that's not actually true. I think I calculated it correctly later on in the paper. You'll see that. So here we have the frequent gamma is equal to 1 over 4 squared. 1 over 4 is the momentum. It's the pressure. K equals gamma times the pressure. Minus 6 over P equals 1. P equals 0.375, which is approximately equal to, exactly equal to 1.2666, which is 1 over the superforce, which is the energy. So the pressure is equal to the energy. And then we have some other stuff that's not that very important. We'll go into. One important point is one of the roots to the golden mean problem is 1.618, which is equal to t. And time doesn't begin until 0, so we don't see the other root, which is minus 0.618 times equal to the imaginary number. So we see that the ether explanation is useful to explain how light travels at the speed of light 3. So this paper 4 is nuclear resonance, the ether and light. In this part we consider how the superforce interacts with matter to form the universe. We see that the universe stokes the mass, which results in mass and time. We derive a polynomial for the universe. We see how light propagates through the ether. The universe is fundamentally a vibratory phenomenon. So if you're taking engineering courses, you want to take a course on waves. It's important. So from French's book from MIT on vibrations and waves, 1971, still around. And we have a formula there that sigma of E, function of E, is equal to sigma E naught divided by 4 times E naught minus E squared divided by R squared plus 1. Gamma is equal to 1 over Q, and Q is equal to 16. So R is equal to 1 over 16. And we calculate out the value for E min minus 1.25. We also realize that energy is equal to the addition of the force and the momentum. The sine of 45 degrees plus the cosine of 45 degrees is equal to root 2. That's the maximum value you can get out of the sine and cosine functions. And you combine the two of them. So E equals root 2 is an important factor. And then if we solve the sigma, the function of E, we get the cotangent of 60 degrees, which functions into our trigonomic identity. So we have, there's the trigonomic identity I'm talking about, 1 plus the cotangent squared of 60 degrees, but equals the cosecant squared of 60 degrees. And so cosecant of 60 degrees is equal to 1 minus the sine of 60 degrees squared equals E squared. So it would be E equals 1 plus S, which equals 2. S is equal to 1 is equal to T, space and time are equal. So E is equal to Planck's constant times the frequency, so 2 is equal to 6.626 nu. Nu is equal to 0.301, which is equal to C. So here we see the product is equal to 7654321 is equal to 5040, and the sum is equal to 7654321. Add them is 28. 5040 divided by 28 is 180. So we have the Teflon ether. We have the subscript is the number of protons. The superscript is the number of protons and neutrons. So we have 2 carbons plus 4 fluorines equals phosphorus plus a neutron. The mass of a neutron is 939. The mass is equal to the ln of T, which is equal to 2.5588. And if we use our golden mean problem, we have E equals 3.9889, which is approximately equal to 4, which happens to be the determinant as well as the mass. And T squared minus T minus 1 equals 4. Bring the 4 to the other side. T squared minus T minus 5 equals 0. T is equal to 2.79, which is approximately equal to 28, which is our sum of our digits. 1.7912 equals 180 equals pi rads. Then we have, there's the product, 5040, 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Mass is equal to 1 over c to the 4th, which is 1 over 81, which is equal to 0.1234569. The sum of the digits is 28. 5040 divided by 28 is 180 degrees, which is equal to pi rads. So now we have the anharmonic oscillator, nonlinear, asymmetric. And from French's book on vibrations and waves, we have the mass times the acceleration, that d2x by dt2 is acceleration, plus k times x, that's Hooke's spring law, plus alpha x squared equals 0. and alpha is equal to 1, K is equal to -1. We have MA equals the force is equal to -1. MA is the first two terms of that anharmonic oscillator. So we have x squared minus x minus f is equal to 0, f is equal to 1. So we have the golden mean parabola, and E equals 1 over sine theta equals 1 over f equals cos secant theta, which is equal to c. E equals 1 over f equals 1 over 1 equals 1, f is equal to 1. So then we have again a Reynolds formula we've already seen, and the value that comes out of that is 0.402, which is a very important number. It's unitless, it has no units, a Reynolds number, and it's a number we see crops up all the time in astrotheology mathematics. So we have x squared minus x minus 1 plus 1/16. 1 over 16 is gamma. So we have x squared minus x minus 3 over 2 equals 0. We have a quadratic and we solve it. Here's a plot of that parabola. And here we have the Clairaut differential equation dE2 by dE, d2E by dt2 plus E equals 0. And we have energy is equal to space. And we have this figure 26 down here at the bottom, and it's reminiscent of Poisson's ratio. So there is the plot of the cosecant function, and notice that it's asymptotic to 3. It's asymptotic to 3. And the speed of light, they say, is 2.79, etc. Almost 3. That's approaching 3. Incidentally, there's only 7 significant figures are necessary in physics. The irrational numbers have to terminate, or you wouldn't have a physical universe. If they terminate, then so how many digits does it take them to terminate? It's 7 because of the 1 over 81 factor. So we have weak nuclear forces here. Force is equal to 1. Force is equal to minus Ks is Hooke's law, spring law. So we have it's equal to minus 0.4233 times minus 3/8 equals 1587, which is equal to 1 minus the sine of 1, which is the moment. So we have the weak force is equal to sine of pi squared. Pi squared comes from, is equal to 1, 3.162, which Brahmagupta thought was the ancient Indian mathematician, thought that pi was equal to 3.162, because when you multiply, when you square it, it's equal to, almost equal to 1.998. Who knows, maybe he's right. I don't know. So anyway, the mass of the periodic table is 118.8. So here's our coupled oscillators modeling light. You have a couple of pendulums there attached by a spring. So then again, we see the Pythagorean identity again. Cotangent squared plus 1 equals cosecant squared. And total energy is potential energy plus kinetic energy equals mc squared plus 1/2 mc squared is equal to 54. Total energy is equal to 54. Part 5, light and sound. There's 6 parts, so we just have this and a little bit to go. Well, light and sound, the human eye. In this part, we explain how the human eye, lined with rods and cones, sees light. The cones for seeing in daylight are impacted by the ether, which began a deflection at the source of the light. If the light travels indefinitely and runs out of the ether, we begin with the geometry of the cone. So a little bit of mechanics. materials here. The strain energy U is equal to the integral of P over 2 times the area times the modulus, Young's modulus, dx. So the cone in the eye is impacted by the impact of the ether particles all the way from the sun, let's say, to the human eye, or reflected off something into the human eye, and we see. So we have the strain energy is equal to the integral from the wavelength from 40 to 50. So you have the area is equal to 1.2566 or 4 pi. The bulk modulus capital K is resistance to the change in volume. K is equal to 1.40 for a diatomic gas. Teflon, I don't think it's gas, but it has a bulk modulus of 1.40. So we have K is equal to minus V times dP by dV. 1.4 is equal to minus 4/3 times dP by dV. And P is equal to 1.05, minus 1.05. That's the pressure. So you have the strain energy there is equal to the integral of P, which is P squared over 2. Energy is equal to 249, which is equal to the period. And we have the deflection, the deflection, the strain is equal to delta L over L. That comes from Hooke's law as well. There at the top, sigma equals Young's modulus E times the strain. And so we have 2.666 divided by A, that's the force over the area, is equal to, should be 1601 times delta L over L. And we have delta L equals 0.0222 divided by 40, the 40 or 50, is equal to 0.555 equals 1 over 180 is 1 over pi, which is our frequency of the human mind. The frequency of touch as well is 4, and the density is 4 over pi, so it's the frequency times the touch. That's how the eye works. It's a transducer. It converts electrical energy into, it converts pressure into electrical energy in the brain, between the eye and the brain. So time is the resistance to any motion in the universe, which is pi by 4. Power is equal to 1.77. It's an important figure. And there's the Hooke's law again. Sigma equals Y, Young's modulus. Sometimes it's Y, sometimes it's Z. And we end up with the total energy equal to 54. We see that light is the movement of an ether particle from the light source which impacts the cone, which is the pressure transducer. The result is that we see light. So this is the final section, Cusick and Young on light. By analogy, light was therefore thought by Young to be a longitudinal compression and rarefaction of the ether in the direction of the light ray, but if this assumption were correct, it would provide no explanation for the polarized light. Sound does not exhibit any polarized phenomena. This is Young speaking. For a long time, the analogy was sound blinded Young and others. Young found it impossible to explain polarization on the undulatory theory because he imagined that light waves in the ether must be transmitted longitudinally like sound waves in air along the path of a ray of light. Then in 1817, a long frustrated Young finally speculated on a possible theoretical solution to the polarization problem. Sound doesn't polarize, light does. Young was making the radical proposal to Arago that light may be a longitudinal wave with a transverse component. Today, following the pioneer work of James Clerk Maxwell in the second half of the 19th century, we know that light is an entirely transverse electromagnetic wave. Electric field and the magnetic wave vibrate in plane perpendicular to the direction of the propagation when the two fields are always at right angles to each other. The electric field E bar is equal to c squared, and the magnetic field B bar is equal to gravity. C squared times gravity. So that'd be 9 times 2/3. Be 6. So this is Maxwell's idea of a propagation of light, the electric field and the magnetic field. And there is the force is equal to E bar times B bar equals the superforce. Force equals momentum equals mv equals mc, when v is c, equals the magnitude of c squared times the magnitude of g times sine theta plus 8/3. M is equal to 9 times 2/3 sine theta plus 8/3, which is equal to 6.673 minus 2.666, which is equal to sine theta equals t, and t is equal to 4. So T is equal to kinetic energy equals 1/2 mv squared. So we put the 4 equals 1/2 times 4 v squared. V is equal to √2. V is the velocity, is the distance over the time. Is equal to 118.6 divided by 4 is equal to 2.97, which is equal to c, speed of light. And there we have the strain energy in Hooke's law again. We'll go into that. So why was physics stuck for 100 years or more? Einstein came out with his theory of relativity in 1905. They called it the miracle year because he wrote 3 important papers. But Einstein had it wrong. There's nothing to be ashamed about, but the physics community wouldn't buck Dr. Einstein. Why not? The theory of relativity was hatched out in the newspapers on the day. Arthur Eddington's experiment with the solar eclipse, showing that light bent because of gravity of the sun, was wrong too. Why would they accept only one explanation for the bending of light? It bends because it is fitting through the interstitial spaces of the ether, and the ether was dropped because of Einstein. This was another error. Thomas Young had it correct. He knew there was the ether. He knew that light was both a longitudinal and transverse wave at the same time, so they had the correct answer. Why did they drop it? Physics shouldn't be done in the newspaper. Einstein won the Nobel Prize, but wisely, not for relativity, but for the photoelectric effect. That was wise, I suppose. Why would scientists drop the principle of the conservation of energy with Einstein's thought experiments? How could traveling in space and returning to Earth to see your twins aging ever become accepted? What about the conservation of energy? These thought experiments are dangerous. The reason we have real experiments is to see what nature has to say. Then we see what could explain the brainstorm to see what could explain the observations. The physics community dropped Einstein in his later years. His papers were rejected by the physics journals in the United States. That turned out to be wise, but physics was stuck with an errant theory for over 100 years until I came up with astrotheology. I'm not trained as a physicist, but as an engineer. I don't have a PhD. That would hinder the acceptance of my theory. Only the open access journals will accept my papers. All the major math and physics journals wouldn't accept my papers. Einstein got his PhD after he was accepted by the physics community. Einstein was thought to be a slacker who didn't attend his physics classes. Ordinary people who are interested in physics are 100 years behind accepting Einstein. they still believe Einstein. So some are physicists who have invested much learning relativity in university classes. They don't think much of the ether. Einstein came up with this idea on relativity when he dreamt as a child of chasing a beam of light. I came up with astrotheology when I dreamt of a child breaking a tangent to a circle. Light does have zero acceleration, but there is a point of zero space in the mental construct that is the universe. How can you have kinetic energy when there's ultimately nothing, ultimately reality relative to anything else? Light moves relative to the ether. Einstein had a high profile who was made out to be a genius of unparalleled attention. My IQ is only the 89th percentile. Why did I get it right where Dr. Einstein got it wrong? Physicists should do a post-mortem to see where and why they went wrong for so long. It cost 100 years of progress. Maxwell got some of it wrong as well, but that's how science evolves. As I said, Thomas Young had the right theory in the 18th century. Why was the ether dropped? It took an untrained physicist, a civil engineer, myself, who wasn't steeped in relativity to get it right. Think of all the wasted education on relativity. Science can and must do better. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes for physics to accept astrotheology. Some accept it now, others haven't heard of it. I suppose if you've invested your whole life in a theory or relativity, it's hard to believe it is all wrong. Nevertheless, that's the way it is. I think it'll be the younger physicists who accept my astrotheology. They haven't invested yet. So goes the battle for truth. It's a worthwhile pursuit. There are some references if you want to peruse them. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the talk. It's been a long talk. Must be an hour. Anyway, I did the best I can to shorten them, but a lot to say. I have to be more careful what I repeat next time. Anyway, thank you for listening.